Hello, welcome to the video. In this section, we're going to be looking at lesson 3.3, where we're going to be completing the square. We looked at completing the square in our Algebra 1 textbooks, and we were able to determine that completing the square allowed us to be able to solve an equation. But the thing is if we had a equation in standard form with a quadratic, the y equals ax squared plus bx plus c, the stipulation for this was a had to equal 1. And while we were looking at that, so since a is 1 for completing the square, the formula is x squared plus bx plus, now c is a unique thing because it's something that's going to like kind of be tied in with b. C is actually going to be b divided by 2 squared. So that is actually going to be the value for c with respect to completing the square. Completing the square is something where uh, we want to get a perfect square trinomial from, which then means that we have, like, this right here is going to be a perfect square trinomial. And then from that, we can then factor that as the square of a binomial. This would then turn into the square of a binomial, which would be x plus whatever b divided by 2 happens to become, and then that is quantity squared. So these two things here are going to be really important formulas for us when we are utilizing completing the square. So here, they want us to find a value for c that makes x squared plus 14x plus c a perfect square trinomial. Then they want us to write the expression as the square of a binomial. So using that formula for the perfect square trinomial, x squared plus bx plus b divided by 2 squared, in this particular one, b is 14. So to make it a perfect square trinomial, it's going to be x squared plus 14x plus 14 divided by 2 is 7. 7 squared is 49. So this is my perfect square trinomial that I'm looking for my value for c. For a square of a binomial, it is now we're going to utilize the x plus b over 2 quantity squared thing, and that is going to be x plus 7 quantity squared. So 4, 5, and 6 are the same directions as that last example. What I would like to do is let's take a look at number 6 because it's got a minus and it'll have some fractions. Or not, maybe not fractions, but decimals for sure. So if we looked at this one to make c, so this one's going to be x squared minus 9x plus negative 9 divided by 2 squared. Negative 9 divided by 2 is negative 4.5. If I were to square that, I would get 20.25. So it would be x squared minus 9x plus 20.25. So that is what would make it a perfect square trinomial. To make it the square of a binomial, it is going to be x. Now I'm going to put minus because b is negative, and I'm going to write it as 4.5 quantity squared. So this one here is an example of one where it would be negative. All right. So now, anytime you are going to be asked to solve an equation by completing the square, there are a couple things that you have to take a look at. The first thing you have to make sure is you got to make sure that a equals 1. If a does not equal 1, or x squared is left by itself, that means that the whole thing has to be divided by whatever that coefficient is, so then a then becomes 1. Then the second step is you're going to place all variables on one side of the equal sign and non-variables on the other. So here I have a variable, and then this one's a non-variable. So I'm going to try to get that over on the left-hand side. So this is going to turn into x squared minus 10x is going to be equal to -7. I got all my variables on one side, all my non-variables on the other side. So to solve the equation by completing the square, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to attempt to complete the square with my variable terms. So completing the square on that left-hand side is going to be x squared minus 10x plus -10 divided by 2 is -5. -5 squared is 25. So what I've created on that left side is a perfect square trinomial. It is now going to be equal to -7 plus 25. Because what I did, I added a 25 to the left-hand side, I must now add a 25 to the right-hand side. So from here, what we're going to do is this is going to be factored out as the square of a binomial. So now this is going to turn into x minus 5 quantity squared. And it's going to be equal to -7 plus 25, which is 18. So now I can use square roots to solve this. So now I'm just going to take the square root of both sides. The square root of x minus 5 quantity squared is just x minus 5. And it's going to be equal to plus or minus the square root of 18. Well, the square root of 18 is not a perfect square number, so it's going to be about 4.24. So now I can rewrite this as two separate equations. X minus 5 is equal to the positive 2.24, and x minus 5 is equal to a negative 4.24. So 4.24 plus 5, this over here is going to be x is 9.24. And then when I add 5 to with the negatives, negative 4.24 plus 5 is 0.76. So those are my two solutions for x when completing the square. So now looking at this one here, again, those two stipulations must hold true. Is a 1? In this case, no. A is 3. So what I'm going to have to do here is I'm going to divide the entire equation by 3 so I can get a as 1, which now gets us to be x squared plus 4x plus 5 is equal to 0. Now that a is 1, now I can put all my variables on one side, all my non-variables on the other. So I got to put my 5 on the other side. So this is now x squared plus 4x is equal to a -5. I subtracted 5 to both sides. Now here I'm going to complete the square on my variable side. So now this is going to be x squared plus 4x plus 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 squared is 4. This is now going to be equal to -5 plus 4. So -5 plus 4 is a -1. So now I got, this now turns into what? X plus Be what? 2, because b divided by 2 squared is equal to a negative 1. All right, so now we are going to take the square root of both sides. All right, the square root of x plus 2 quantity squared is just x plus 2. And then this is going to be plus or minus the square root of negative 1. Well, that's, now we know we have about imaginary numbers. This is going to be plus or minus I. So now we have plus or minus I in this particular instance. So now I'm going to break this up into two separate equations. X plus 2 equals a positive I, and x plus 2 is equal to a negative I. So both of these, so this is going to be x equals, so when I subtract 2, it's going to be negative 2 plus I. For that one, when I subtract 2 here, it's going to be x is going to be negative 2 minus I. Last problem that we're going to take a look at, it says they want us to write y equals x squared minus 12x plus 18 in vertex form, and then they want us to identify the vertex. So if you recall, vertex form is y is equal to a times it by the quantity of x minus h squared plus k. So I want to get standard form into vertex form. So here is how we're going to go about and solve that. What we're going to do first is, all I want to do is look at my two variable terms, x squared, in this case, negative 12x. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in the equation. So I'm going to go y equals, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to complete the square with simply those values. So now this turns into x squared minus 12x plus negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6. Negative 6 squared is 36. All right, and then I'm going to add the 18 on the outside. But because I added a 36 to this right side, I'm going to add 36 to the left side as well to keep the equation balanced. Now, from here, I am going to use this set of parentheses and rewrite this as a square of a binomial, just like we did with completing the square. So I'm just going to write 36 plus y is equal to, this is now going to be x minus 6 quantity squared plus 18. And then the final step is I'm just going to subtract 36 to both sides. So now y is going to be equal to x minus 6 quantity squared. Okay, what? Minus 18. So that is my equation in vertex form, which then allows us to um, easily identify the vertex, right? Because the vertex comes from h comma k. Well, my h in this case is 6 because it's always the opposite of how it appears. And then k is negative 18 because it's always represented as is. So my vertex is positive 6 comma negative 18. And that is being able to use completing the square. Hope this helps. Till next time.